And welcome into Lions Central Radio. I am Nick Castora. As always, my co-host Brandon Alisklu is alongside for the ride. A tough one to get into here, folks. You know where we're starting. The Lions find a way to lose. The Buffalo Bills' final score was 17-14. You could say the Lions coulda, shoulda, woulda won this game, but they didn't. A lot of angles and aspects to get to before we look forward to next week. Obviously, we start with the Bills, and we always open with our takeaways. Kent Platte's going to be joining us as well, but first I'm going to turn to Brandon. What was your biggest one from here, Brandon?
It's got to be the offensive line for me. I mean, they were atrocious in this game. They gave up, 6 sacks? Pro Football Focus says there's only 7 more hurries, but overall, I feel like he was hurried on darn near every throwback there. Stafford, that is. Warford did rebound a bit, but looking back at the tape, he missed a few blocks as well. But I saw it, I think it was Justin Rogers who got the quote, and I read it on Jeff Rissen's article, or vice versa, however it worked out, that the Bills were attacking them on different levels of speed, meaning they'd have one defender come in quickly and then another one kind of slow ball it and wait and then attack, and it just completely discombobulated that offensive line. And that's exactly how they forced that fumble in the beginning of the fourth quarter. So to me, it's time to sound the alarm on this offensive line. It's really dragging down the offense.
Yeah. Kent, what did you see from the offensive line, and did you have a bigger takeaway?
More specific one anyway. The offensive line was not good. I don't think we could ram that home any harder that the offensive line was just poor. A lot of it centered around Rob Sims. He had to have had his worst game as a pro. I've never seen him as bad as he was in this game. Dominic Raiola played okay in spurts. Warford, like you said, he had his moments where he struggled, but for the most part it was a rebound. It was, even though he had the 3 penalties, it was really nice to get Waddle back into the lineup because we didn't really have as much pressure as we've been getting from that turnstile over there. But for me, the biggest thing was Rob Sims. He brought down that entire left side of that line. Riley Reef did everything that he could. He ended up not having that great of a game, but man, was he trying his best to do his job and Sims at the same time.
Yeah, Coach Caldwell addressed the offensive line a little bit today. I read some quotes about Sims. Sims is staying in there. There was some people asking about Swanson possibly, and no move's going to be made. The offensive line is going to stay as is, at least going into next week. The guy they were protecting, Matthew Stafford, there's no way to get around. He had just a terrible football game. He was hurried quite a bit. Yes, 6 sacks. I don't know how many of them exactly will attribute to the offensive line, how many to Stafford not getting the ball out. Missing open receivers, though, a couple of them I noted. We'll get into it later, Brandon, as well. Just missing Eric Ebron wide open. Is it just a bad game from Stafford, or Kent? I'll go to you here. Is it just a bad game from Stafford, or is it when Calvin Johnson's not at full health or not in the game, he's just a different and much worse quarterback?
This is actually probably not going to be a very popular thing, but I don't think it had anything to do with Calvin. I mean, sure, he would have done.
Yeah, with Stafford, the thing you have to look out for is I understand why everybody assumes it's going to be because Calvin wasn't in, but he had one of his best games without Calvin, or where Calvin was nothing but a decoy. Against the Jets, he put up a passer rating of 116.4, and we all know, I think, how many catches did Johnson have? 2 for like 12 yards?
Yeah.
Pretty much non-existent at that
And
point.
none until the fourth quarter, I don't think.
Right. He really, you could see it on the tape where he did miss those guys open down the field, like Ebron and like Tate, where his eyes were just low. They were focused on that, avoiding the pass rush, and maybe a little too early. Maybe he was skittish. But, as you said last week, the guy you were most scared of was Mario Williams. Well, he came to wreak a little havoc.
Yeah, he did, and the Buffalo defense really wreaked havoc. Detroit's offense only had the 1 touchdown. There was a defensive score, and they just second half were completely inept. And it brings up a larger point for me here is I'm looking at the NFC, and of the teams that have played 5 games, Detroit has the fewest points for of any team in the NFC that's played 5 games. Arizona and St. Louis have fewer points, but they've only played 4. Who would have thought Detroit 99 points for? They've only got 79 against. That's all. That is the best in the NFC. So it's the defense that is kind of keeping this team afloat at 3-2. And I don't know where to start trying to remedy this offense because the running game, the passing game, and the offensive line are all issues.
No, I agree. Obviously, the offensive line, we were hoping that when Adrian Waddle came back, that it would give them some kind of it would bring back what they had last year, some stability. It's the same group of guys, but what we're seeing is Waddle, he did all right, but
Yeah.
it's his first game back after injuring a calf. I mean, they're
Had
not
some
the same
penalties.
group.
Right.
Right, and Riley Reef is a passable left tackle, maybe. He's not great, and we knew that last year. So I'm not entirely surprised. I am a little surprised the fact that they're not getting a little more vertical passing game going. I think Stafford's still learning the offense, and I think that's part of how things are going to go. Is that as they kind of, okay, so now we've gone from attacking down the field all the time. Now we just have to protect the ball. Like he's kind of worried about. You could see it in his thought process. Don't turn over the ball. What he needs to do is get back to taking shots when they're there, and I think that'll come with time once he gets a little more comfortable in that offense.
Yeah, and we can only hope that that comes as he gets more comfortable in the offense. Kent, I'm going to throw it to you here. Trying to remedy this offense because it's now been an issue in multiple games. Where do the fixes start? Is it as simple as the offensive line getting better? Is it Stafford getting better? Is it this non-existent running game coming into play? I mean, it has to be baby steps at some point, but where does it start?
It starts with Coach Lombardi. I was telling Brandon earlier, I've been calling him Coach Lino, which is Lombardi in name only. He's not as dynamic as we would like to see an offensive play caller when he comes onto the field. He brought over the Saints playbook, which is great. Having a good playbook that can make all those mismatches work for you is fantastic, but we need to have a guy that's able to make those play calls. You have to call the right plays. You have to get the right reads out there. You have to make sure that he's looking in the right spots. And that's where Lombardi still has to grow. Part of it is just because he's so new at this. He was a quarterback's coach. He wasn't an offensive coordinator. This is brand new ground for him on tread. But he's not making the mismatches that he should be. One of the articles that I'm working on for the Silverdome Blues, which is one of the websites that I write for, it has to do entirely with how the Lions need to feature Eric Ebron right now. They need to put him in and get him as a focal point of this offense. And not just because he's that 10th overall pick and you need to start using him as one, but because Calvin Johnson is injured. And what Calvin Johnson brings to the offense isn't just that he's the greatest wide receiver in the NFL, he's the biggest mismatch in the NFL. And that's where Eric Ebron can make that advantage work for him. He's a huge mismatch against linebackers. He's a mismatch against safeties. He's a mismatch against corners. But they're not featuring in the way that they need to in this offense. They need to get him the ball. They need him to get targets. And it's going to be painful at first. He's going to drop some passes. It's going to happen. But they need to get him some more targets.
Yeah, I noted. I think the number was 37 snaps in this one, and like you said with Calvin Hurt, you want to see more from him. He didn't get as much time on the field in this game as I would hope he would moving forward. Kent, do you think it's a matter of us wanting him to get on the field more, or do you think he actually will moving forward?
I'm hoping that he actually will. The Saints playbook that Lombardi brought over with him has those plays for the tight end. The problem with it is that a lot of those plays are for Jimmy Graham. They're built for that big seam-stretching tight end. And Ebron can do that. That's just not the only thing he can do. He's never going to be able to do that as well as Jimmy Graham. So not all those plays are going to work. But you can do things with him that you couldn't do with Jimmy Graham. You can line Eric Ebron up in the backfield and motion him out. You can line him up in the slot. You can line him up in line. There's a lot of things they can do with him, and they started to do that early in the preseason and when they started to bring him along in the preseason, but we really haven't got a chance to see that during the regular season, and it's really disappointing to me to not see that, at the very least, to start getting people to pull. If you watch the Buffalo Bills coverages, they were paying attention to Eric Ebron. Obviously not that one play where Stafford should have gone for the TD, but they were paying a lot of attention to him in coverage, and that's what we want him for. We need him to pull those people in coverage to either help Ebron or to get Tate more involved by getting him open.
Well, and another thing that we should at least point out regarding Ebron's 38 snaps, that is as many as Brandon Pettigrew. So he's playing as many as any other tight end. And as far as this offense as a whole and Stafford struggles and everything like that, when he doesn't have the guys like Calvin Johnson or Joseph Boyer, you really lose a lot of that red zone capability. So that's something to look forward to when those guys start to come back. I don't know if Fourier is going to play this week. I'm pretty sure he didn't practice today because, you got to make sure that dog doesn't pee in the house, priorities and all that. But it's not just the offense, though, that cost his team the game. It was obviously special teams, and I think we should take that there now. Alex Henry, Well, there's a reason he's gone. Could you be any happier about that, Nick?
I was just happy that we got rid of Freese, and I didn't know if Henry was the answer, but he was 1 of 2 in his first game, made a long kick, and I was willing to give him a chance. But when you go 0 for 3 as he did in this game and had such a huge impact on the final score, they had no choice but to again go trot out different legs for workouts. I'm really surprised Jay Feely didn't get one the first time around for a workout. I guess this one he did really well as did Matt Prater, obviously the guy that won the job. Connor Barth also came in. Caldwell says Prater was properly vetted. For those of you who don't know, he had the suspension with the Broncos after alcohol issues. Caldwell says they did their due diligence, and he's the right guy for him now. And a lot of reporters and such thought that meant he had talked to Peyton Manning, and Manning gave him the okay go on Prater. Obviously has the leg. He's had some accuracy issues in the past, but this is a clear upgrade over Henry. And at this point, I'll take whatever we can get moving forward. We have to keep trying new legs here, and Prater's at least got the pedigree, and he's done this for quite a while.
I agree, and there's obviously a little bit of a worry with Prater as far as the alcohol. I saw a tweet from Kyle Meeke talking about, booze was his downfall. That's obviously why he has the DUI. He got caught drinking again at his house, because he had to take random breathalyzers or whatever it was, and that led to the suspension. And now that he hasn't had a drink in 6 weeks, and we wish him the best in that regard. And obviously, we're not going to pass any judgment on that. But what I will go back to, as far as Alex Henry, one of the things that people I don't know if they really thought about, it's not just the points coming off the board. It's the fact that
field position.
Yeah, the field position was huge. I mean, there was one at the end of the third quarter, or somewhere in the third quarter, mid to end, where it directly led to a field goal because they were so close. They didn't have to go very far. And obviously, the end of game, they just needed one 20-yard, 25-yard pass to Watkins, and, well, that was that. I don't know that Prater was the best choice. I know he is the most talented of the two, but we're just going to have to see and hope that works out. One thing I do want to talk about before we move on from this game, that defense is legit. I mean, my gosh, they seriously shut down that team for most of the afternoon. I know Kyle Orton had 309 yards passing, and most of it was dinking and dunking and working its way down the field. But as far as they shut down that rushing game, I was scared of those running backs. It's just when you can't put points on the board and you can't pick up first downs, you could see that they wore down. Kent, do you think this defense has enough to continue to carry this team if the offense cannot get it rolling?
Yeah, it's really hard to doubt him at this point. Terrell Austin's doing what he's doing with his, fifth or sixth nickelback he's working with right now. He's lost his planned on starting Sam linebacker. He's lost his starting Mike linebacker. I've been preaching him up since the beginning. He's my favorite coordinator. I'm glad that we have him, but even I couldn't have predicted that he's been doing this well. He brings so much unique design. I was talking earlier about Lombardi. It's the exact opposite with Austin, because he is able to do things that actually dictate where the offense is going to go from the defensive side of the ball. He basically tells them, look, this is where you're going to go with the ball, and then we're going to stop you. And it's amazing to watch at times some of the plays that he's able to set up. And it changes every game, which I don't remember the last time we've had an offense or a defense that's changed from game to game. But he's changed his play calling up for every player that he's went against, every quarterback. He didn't blitz hardly at all against Aaron Rodgers. I think it was like 3 blitzes on the day, something like that. And then he brought the blitz right back out the next week. He's got a thing that we've never been able to have before, which is that versatility and that real dynamic play calling ability. And I think it's here to stay as long as we don't have any really, just earth-shattering injuries like Sue or Levy.
Yeah, Kent, before we let you go, looking forward to next week. It looks like it's going to be Bridgewater for the Vikings. What do you expect to see out of the Lions on the road at Minnesota?
I don't think they're going to try to run as much as they did against the Bills. They really tried to get that run game going, even though it was with George Wynn for most of it because Reggie was injured. I think they're going to air it out early, and they're going to air it out often. I would love to see them start to feature Ebron. Like I said, I'm going to be posting about that either later tonight or tomorrow, but I'm not quite sure that's going to happen right away. I'm a little concerned about Harrison Smith if he plays and whether or not they're going to challenge him in that down the field. But I want to see them start to challenge those corners. Those corners are not very good at Minnesota. And Tate right now is number 5 in the NFL for receiving yards, and he's the number 2 receiver in Detroit, and he has the 5th most receiving yards. Get that guy the ball and watch him destroy people against that Minnesota secondary.
We'll be looking for him to destroy people, and we always appreciate the time with Kent Platte when he joins us on the program. Frequent guest and always great insight. Kent, we will talk to you again soon for sure, my man.
Thank you, guys. Have a good one.
All right.
You too.
So that was Kent Platte. Always has good insight. Looking back on this Bills game as we try and close the door on it. Just one more thing I wanted to touch on, Brandon, before we do our MVPs and all that was a guy for Buffalo, Sammy Watkins. Oh my goodness, made some in this game. I think he went 7 for 87. I mean, our defense looked really good. The secondary did look really good again, but Sammy Watkins did what he wanted out there.
Well, and that's not surprising as far as we knew what he was before the draft. That's why we had
Yeah.
so many discussions about him. I will say, as far as the coverage that allowed him to get the that last 20, 25 yards that put him in position to, well, who knew? First off, who knew 58 yards was field goal range?
Incredible.
In Detroit, it only extends to about the 10-yard line. But it was because of the way that they attacked him. They put a pretty all-out blitz in there, and it really spread them out as far as the secondary. And give Horton credit. He stood in there. He made the throw. Watkins made the catch, and they made the plays when they had to, kind of like Detroit had been doing in weeks past. But yeah, Sammy Watkins was cost 2 first-round picks for a reason. So there's nothing really surprising.
No, but the Lions, as we look at our game MVPs, mine comes from the same position for Detroit. Golden Tate, as Kent touched on, 7 catches, 134 yards, and a TD. In the absence of Calvin Johnson, who was out early, had just 1 catch for 7 yards. Golden Tate, again, steps up in a big way. You can go with the same guy for this multiple times if he keeps earning it, and Tate's earning every bit of that salary we gave him in the offseason. I've been extremely impressed by the way he stepped up in this offense. Even on a day when the passing game wasn't there and wasn't good at all, Golden Tate was great. So I know you're going defensive, but if you're going to highlight one guy in this offense that did things the right way, it was undoubtedly Golden Tate.
Oh, I agree. He was it 90 or 89 yards after the catch.
Yeah.
That's phenomenal. I mean, he was stopping on a dime and making people look stupid for trying to tackle him, and he darn near almost won the game by himself. I mean, that was a 9-yard slant he caught, and then he took off for another 46 yards. So, and he put the Lions in what should be conceivable field goal position, but well, these things don't work out like they should. What does work out, as it does every week, defensively, DeAndre Levy had another monster game. He had 12 tackles. He had 8 defensive stops, which means that the offensive play fails. I don't even know what other adjectives to use with him. All pro is starting to become, I don't know, kind of ho-hum when we're talking about him and his beard. The only thing I did notice is that he is obviously the screen buster for the Lions. He kind of took a little bit too far of inside track sometimes, got caught up in the wash and couldn't get out there on the screens and the flares, and that's really how Kyle Orton was able to rack up so many yards. But it's hard to fault the guy when he's filling holes, calling the defense, and coming up with 12 tackles.
Yeah, he's going to continue to be the anchor all year. We know that. Most disappointing, I wanted to put Stafford here, but we've talked about him quite a bit early on in the program, so I'm going to go with a different guy, and that's Reggie Bush. In this game, 6 carries for 13 yards, and our bet, the Joik Bell Reggie Bush bet's turning into a total joke at this point. Reggie Bush only has 161 yards on the year. He's only had 1 carry that went for more than 20 yards, and he has 1 touchdown. And now he's missing practice today and this week and don't know if he'll play on Sunday. He's just I know the explosion is still there. We obviously saw it on his big scamper. I think it was against the Jets, but it's just not there enough between either of these running backs. And Bush is only averaging 3.6 yards a carry. There's no running game in Detroit, and it's a balance between the offensive line's fault and these running backs' fault. I get that, but I expect more out of Reggie Bush, and I'm just not seeing what I want out of him at all.
No, obviously, yes, the injuries start to take a toll, and he is a little bit older, but it's been very our bet has been very disheartening. Is it too late to take George Wynn? Because he might end up being the leading rusher on this team before it's all over. But not if Rob Sims has anything to say about it, because he is not going to let anybody run the ball well. He is my most disappointing line. I know Ken talked about it specifically, him quite a bit. But just to kind of recap, he gave up 2 sacks, he gave up a QB hit, and he also gave up 2 hurries. And that's on top of doing an extremely poor job run blocking. Jeff Risdon did a great job breaking down his ineffectiveness. I guess we'll say, when the running play would be going the other way, the only thing all he basically has to do is get in between the defensive tackle and that side. He doesn't even have to do a great seal block. He doesn't even have to hold him for that long, and he couldn't get that done. It's exactly what we've been seeing from him this year and what we saw from him a bit last year. But, these things happen. I guess we knew it was going to happen, but let's go ahead.
But just with him, it's like he was one of the most consistent presences on the offensive line in recent years, and just to see, I don't know if it's deterioration or just bad play in this game, but it was alarming how bad Rob Sims was. So not to take over your point there, but yeah, it was really alarming just how bad he was, and I don't know if it's going to continue or if it was a one-off, but if it does, there's not going to be a spot for Rob Sims much longer.
No, I agree. And actually, I was just going to go and say these things happen, but what we need to pay attention to is the guys who are actually doing their jobs without anybody paying attention. And I think you had a good guy in mind.
Yeah, it's our unsung hero of the game, or GOAT, whichever way we want to take it. And I went with an unsung hero, and it's with all this, the look at the special teams and just how bad the field goal kicking has been, and it's been historically awful. We know that, but the punter that we have is turning out to be one of the best in football. Do you remember they drafted Sam Martin? I think it was in the 5th round last year. And
10th round pick, best pick ever.
In this one, he had, because the Detroit offense was so bad, he had 7 punts. They went for 330 yards, average of 47. 4 of them pinned Buffalo inside their own 20-yard line. Sam Martin continues to do exactly what you want out of a punter, and that's give the opposition terrible field position. He does it week in and week out. He rarely makes mistakes. I know it's just a punter, and it's just one small aspect of the game, but when you do it as well as Sam Martin does, it has a huge impact on what the opposing offense can do. Sam Martin, we haven't really talked about him much on the program just because of how bad the field goal kicking's been. When we talk special teams, that's where we look. He deserves a little bit of love, even in a loss like this. He's keeping Detroit's in some games, I think, and he deserves some love.
Yeah, he's so I do that grades piece right after. I think you've done that in the past as well.
Yeah.
And I ended up giving these special teams to C. I know how bad Henry was, but that's how good Sam Martin's been. And Ross had a pretty solid game back there too. He returned 2 punts for 48 yards. I don't know what else needs to be done to get this team to into the end zone or at least between the uprights. But everybody else is trying, or at least giving some effort. I also went with another unsung GOAT. It's Adrian Waddle, and I know he's just coming back, but the Lions were really hoping for a spark out of him, and he just couldn't provide it. Granted, he had to go against that Bills front 7, which ruins a lot of days. But there were 3 penalties. There were a few others that could have been called. He was a drive killer out there.
Yeah, and we continue to make the offensive line a focal point of this show because it's been so bad as a whole, and you hoped Waddle would be the resurgence, the thing that sparked it, like you said, and he just didn't. We'll go ahead and chalk this one up to him getting his feet back under him because, again, he is just back, but with how bad Sims was, if both of these guys are this bad moving forward, the offense isn't going to get going. So unsung GOAT in this game, but hopefully not moving forward. We got to get to this. Probably the biggest news surrounding the Lions this week is Calvin Johnson shut down for a while. It's a high ankle sprain. I say shut down for a while. I don't think they've actually officially ruled him out for Sunday. He says he'd like to play, possibly. It's all a big guessing game mystery, as all these injuries always are with the Lions. I wouldn't expect him to play. I don't think many do expect him to play. So on the assumption that he is out for a while, how long, Brandon, is too long for Calvin to be out? How long can this team survive without him? And is this a death knell for the Lions?
Well, and I hate to keep pounding on Jeff Rissen's points, but he kind of makes them before I get to say him on the show. He brought up, actually even before the game he talked about it, that the next 3 opponents are pretty poor defensively. Mm-hmm. Minnesota's giving up 25 points a game. New Orleans is giving up 27.5, and Atlanta's giving up 28. We saw what Stafford could do without Johnson when he had that 116 rating against the Jets, and that's against a pass rush that is pretty dominant. This isn't a pass rush that you have to worry about as far as Minnesota or New Orleans or even Atlanta. So I think that this team can be all right, and I think it might be all right if they shut him down until then.
Yeah, I agree. You shut him down until the bye, in my opinion. You certainly don't ship him off to London with whatever's wrong with him for that game against Atlanta. He's been a non-factor each of the last 2 weeks as it is. They barely lost to Buffalo, and against New York they found a way to win. I don't. I mean, obviously, Calvin Johnson, when healthy, is the best receiver in football, but he's hampered right now, and we've seen it each of the last 2 weeks. He's not Calvin Johnson right now. So having him on the field against Minnesota and New Orleans and Atlanta without giving him the proper rest or whatever he needs for this ankle isn't doing anyone any favors. It's occupying space where he's not Calvin Johnson. So shut him down until the bye. If you come back out of the bye and he plays and he's not himself, well, you did what you could, but you know you're not getting the right number 81 if you line him up there this week against Minnesota. I'm not a fan of him even attempting to get minutes this week.
Yeah, I think we're both agreed there. The other health updates, Joique Bell and Theo Riddick both practice this week, or both practice today is Wednesday, so that's good to see. As far as since Bush probably isn't going to be out there, he didn't practice, neither did Calvin, and neither did Foria. Which you really got to wonder how long Foria is going to be out. This is now 2 games he's missed, and when you don't have Johnson and you don't have Foria, you're really missing 2 red zone threats there.
Yeah, Foria's phantom injury at home. You hit it earlier, the dog thing. I don't even know how to explain or what that was, but Foria's still out. Yeah, you're missing offensive playmakers. You're hoping other guys step up, but especially in the red zone, you're missing your biggest targets height-wise, and so be it. It's going to be a detriment, but this team has to find a way to get in the red zone before we start worrying about them scoring once they're down there. So, and that all starts this week against the Minnesota Vikings on the road at Minnesota. Remember, Minnesota's an outdoor team for right now while the new stadium's going up. So Detroit's on the road in the outdoor climate against a 2-3 Minnesota team. They've been as up and down as anyone in the league, really, Brandon. To start the season, they were at St. Louis, got a win, then dropped 2 in a row against New England and New Orleans, beat Atlanta, and they're coming off a whooping on Thursday Night Football because on Thursday night we only get lopsided games. This one was at Green Bay, and they fell 42-10. The quarterback's been back and forth. The word is it's going to be Bridgewater this week. He's healthy. We'll see if that plays out as it's expected to. But what do you think about this Vikings team?
Yeah, I think up and down is about a roller coaster is the best way to describe this team. The average margin, not of defeat or a victory, just overall for this team, 21 points, and they're almost 500. That's just wild. I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that before. But I kind of want to get into what scares me about this team, and it is the guy you just brought up. It's Teddy Bridgewater, because if you have Christian Ponder under center, this team is not going to beat anybody. So, yes, there are better players on this team right now, or guys that might have more of an impact or whatever, but Bridgewater could be a difference maker here. He's calm, especially for a rookie. He has a better passer rating when blitz, 96.4, than when he's not, 90.5. And he's also an able rusher. He'll get you 4.5 yards per carry so far. So to me, that's the guy I'm worried about coming into this week.
Yeah, he's a dynamic quarterback that someone like Christian Ponder isn't, and he's someone that at least makes you game plan differently. And we'll see how Terrell Austin responds. I don't think he had to respond to Cam Newton earlier in the season because Cam wasn't himself. He's incapable of running. Bridgewater's someone that can do a lot more things with the football right now, so it'll be definitely interesting and possibly scary. We'll see how the defense responds. I don't like using hyperbole or things like that, but same old Lions is what scares me. And what I mean by that is this team coming out and not responding. As we've seen them do so many times in the past, they'll come out flat after a loss like they just suffered a really tough loss, and then they just won't have it the next week. I don't know how this team responds under Jim Caldwell after a loss like this. I'm eager to see how they respond, and I hope to see a team that responds like they're trying to make the playoffs and they think they're going to win this division, but I don't know. So are we going to see the same old Lions, or is this a new Lions team that is going to respond in a big way? It's a question that we obviously don't have the answer for you before the game, but it scares me.
No, that's understandable. I kind of brought up that moniker in a couple of things I've written so far. But the fact that this team can lean on the defense and it doesn't need the offense to score 38 points to win a game, and that they've been kind of steady in the way that they've played despite all of the injuries, and there have been a ton of injuries, it leads me to have a little more faith than usual. Although, granted, I've been burned so many times, I guess I'm just kind of numb to it. So what's the difference, I guess? But on a happier note, I think Detroit has a real advantage in this game, and that's also what I was talking about as far as being able to lean on that defense. Detroit has a complete defense. There's playmakers in all 3 levels. The SB Nation Minnesota Vikings site, and it's escaping my mind right now, something Norseman or whatever. They do a pretty in-depth Pro Football Focus breakdown, and they found that there as far as attacking the defense, their best luck is going to be running at the defensive ends. Has nothing to do with the secondary. When is the last time you could say that about a Detroit defense?
Yeah, the Viking site is the Daily Norseman, the SB Nation site you mentioned. I'm just surprised we're both going. I mean, before the season, when I looked at this game, if you were going to say the biggest advantage for Detroit, we were both going to go with defensive things. That's just how football works, I guess. Wouldn't have made any sense, but here we are. It's not Stafford or Calvin Johnson or Reggie Bush. We're looking at Detroit's defense. I think it's the defensive scheme against a young quarterback. This one happens to be Bridgewater. You mentioned how he scares you. I think Detroit's defensive scheme that Terrell Austin cooks up should scare him. The blitz packages, the varied looks, and how they shift at the line of scrimmage. Not just for Bridgewater, but any young quarterback going against a scheme like that moves around and changes what they're doing. Bridgewater's not going to get consistent looks from this defense. It encourages mistakes, and I think that's what Bridgewater's going to be led into. That's why I touched on it a couple weeks ago against Geno Smith. That's just what I think this defense can do. I think this scheme is going to cause havoc for Bridgewater. He could get his plays and wreak havoc of his own, but I think as far as advantages, the scheme that Detroit runs is perfect for a young and questionable quarterback.
Yeah, and that's fair. And like I said, I kind of wanted to temper my point of being scared of Bridgewater because I think he's the only quarterback on the roster that has a chance to beat him. There's one other thing that I wanted to point out, and it's neither here nor there before we get into what it's going to take for the Lions to win. Harrison Smith, he might be out with an ankle injury, but he's obviously been phenomenal. I was kind of upset Detroit passed on him a couple years ago in the draft, but his partner, Robert Blayton, not so much. 75% of the passes thrown at him are being completed for 116.7 ranking. That's where Ebron needs to be used. It's against that seam, against that safety, or when they go and the play that everybody's seen probably by now and Justin Rogers featured was that 4 verticals. Tate's got to expose that guy. And as long as Stafford will look for him, they should be able to put up enough points to lean on that defense. But as far as what it's going to take for the Lions to win, for me, it's limiting Minnesota to 65 yards rushing. I know that's a pretty aggressive number as far as because this team runs the ball so well, but they haven't run into the Detroit Lions defense yet. They've been playing guys like Atlanta, Green Bay, or whoever. So I think Detroit can pull that off, and if they can, they're going to take that young rookie quarterback. They're going to put him in uncomfortable situations, and they're not going to let him establish a rhythm using short passes.
Yeah, Detroit's defense obviously capable of doing just that against Asiata and McKinnon, names that aren't going to scare too many people with Peterson out. We'll see how the defense does in that regard. I went on the offensive side. I think Detroit wins if Matthew Stafford shows up, and I keep that simple, and that term may not mean much initially, but we've seen the bad from Stafford, and we've seen it really bad against Buffalo. But if he shows up and comes to play and is spreading the ball to his receivers and is the good Matt Stafford that we've seen, there's no way that this team can lose against Minnesota. We can't trust Detroit's running game. We keep trying to work it in and make our predictions that Bush or Bell or someone is really going to figure it out. And I don't know if it's going to happen or when it's going to happen. So I've kind of taken that out of my mind at this point. I know Stafford can show up. Will he? If he does, and if it's not just Golden Tate, if Eric Ebron is involved and he's finding other receivers and getting other playmakers the football and moving it down the field, then Detroit's going to win this game. It seems obvious, but we don't know if Stafford will show up. I think and hope he will. I think he's going to spread the ball around quite a bit, and he's got Golden Tate to lean on when he needs them. But I'm cautiously optimistic that Ebron is going to get the touches that me, you, and Kent have all said he deserves and really needs to get with Calvin out of the lineup.
Well, it's interesting. I think it dovetails right into both my predictions, so I'm just going to lay them both out there at the same time.
Sure.
I had the Lions winning 27-16. I think they can score more points than that, but after the output we've seen lately, and I think they're only averaging 19 a game or so, I don't want to go too high. But my bold prediction, and it's right in line with what you're saying right there, I think Stafford bounces back this week and has a rating that is at least 94 or higher.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, that is kind of in line with where I was going, and I obviously am expecting the similar kinds of things out of Stafford. And my game prediction is 24-14. Pretty similar to what you're going. We're in the same vein here. Detroit's going to win 10 or 11 points. This is a game they should win, and after a loss to Buffalo at home, it's almost a game that they need to win here against a division opponent and arguably the worst team in the division in Minnesota. It's a game you expect Detroit to win, and if they are truly a playoff team, it's a game that they will win. As far as bold predictions, you just said you're taking Stafford to bounce back, rating of 94+. Just to update you on the tally here, or the the audience on the tally. I was terrible yet again last week. It's a running theme. I'm 3-7 on the year now. I picked Detroit to win at home, and I picked Mario Williams to have 3 tackles for a loss. Just missed that one. Williams was a huge influence. The whole Buffalo defensive line was, but the numbers didn't pan out for me. He had 1 sack, 1 tackle for a loss. You as well picked the Lions to win, and you picked 100 total yards for Reggie. Wishful thinking. Bush did not do anything yet again. So you dropped to 6-4. Clear-cut lead, though, because I've just been that bad. Give me, as far as a bold prediction, I'm with you that the rushing defense is going to be tremendous per usual. I think that it's going to be the lowest rushing total allowed so far this season by the Lions, and that's saying something. They've been very good all year. But give me, against Asiata and McKinnon, I don't see much from those two. I see Minnesota having to abandon the run rather early in this game and try and figure out the pass. So, lowest rushing total allowed so far by the Detroit Lions to get me back on the right track with bold predictions, Brandon.
Well, it'd be nice to have a little competition here, just like it'd be nice to have a little conversation with our fans out there, the listeners. You can reach us anywhere on social media out there, Lions Central Radio on Facebook, at Lions Central PFC on Twitter, at Brandon Olisoglu for me on Twitter, ALISOGLU, and at Nick Kostora, KOSTORA.
Yeah, it's not a very beautiful bet at this point, but it is still ongoing. The Reggie Bush versus Joik Bell. Joik didn't play in this one, obviously. 36 points for him. Reggie did play and was a total non-factor. Chalk him at, I think it's 50 or 56. I think it's only 50. Either way, he's got a lead for now. This thing's going to be playing out all season because they've just been so terrible, both of them. But hopefully that improves. The whole Lions improves. Hopefully the Kool-Aid gets a little sweeter this week, folks. Obviously it's a little downtrodden coming off this Buffalo game. Real good chance to rebound against Minnesota. We'll be back next week to break it all down, as always. For Brandon Olisoglu, I am Nick Kostora. Thank you so much for tuning in to Lions Central Radio.